Have you ever noticed that the lowest vibrational creatures produce the most and the easiest, the most readily? Like, have you ever noticed that? When you consider the difference between a cockroach and an elephant, right? Like a cockroach, similar to many reptiles and other things that can reproduce in great numbers all at once, a cockroach lays its egg sac and walks off, and that could contain anywhere from 50 to 75 eggs per egg sac. Okay, I looked that up just for this video. Okay, when you consider that versus like an elephant is pregnant largely with one calf. I don't think they've had a lot of twin elephants. That's a lot of weight to carry for 2 years. But usually a pregnant elephant has a gestation period of 2 years, and it produces one calf. So if you think about the difference between elephants and cockroaches, one is very involved in the life of the calf. One is, strategic. One has the capacity to strategize. One has the capacity to remember, great quantities of water and water sources and, resources for the whole herd. One has the capacity to come up with strategy to fend off predators. One has the capacity to play with their child and recognize innocence and the non-threat of other species. They say that they've checked out an elephant's brain, put probes in its brain and noticed how its brain reacted to seeing pictures of different life forms. And when they saw human beings, they registered us as cute. They know when something is a threat and when something is not a threat, and that's a sign of intelligence. When you compare that to a cockroach that lays an egg sac and walks off and goes and does the next thing as soon as it can, it's very obvious who the better parent is, the dare I say superior caregiver is, right? So when we think about that in terms of the previous conversation I had about where I was considering anti-natalism, which again means people who don't think that other people should continue having children. That's anti-natalism. Natal meaning baby, anti-natalism, anti people having babies. When you consider that last conversation, and you consider that example I just gave, I think it just fits together. I think any thinking rational being that has to be more aware, because we just don't have the numbers, right? Any rational thinking being that has to be more aware about all the different parameters of life and the dangers of life and how to strategize in life, when you consider how that being has to think of all that, it makes sense that they would only bear 1 or 2 children, if any children at all, because there's so much to contend with and they know the stakes of life are very high. A cockroach, I think, I don't know how a cockroach's mind works. I'm not a biologist, but I figure they've got the numbers. So we've got the numbers. Fuck it. Hopefully, I just dropped this egg sac. Hopefully you guys make it. I probably don't even have that thought. I'm going to go on and eat whatever piece of trash I can find and go and mate and, do whatever I need to do to keep this, samsara life existence going. And I'm not even thinking about it. It just lets you know, there's so much you can glean from nature, but it just lets you know that those of us, and I'm talking about Homo sapiens now, those of us who reproduce without a thought are probably lower life forms in some way, and either vibrationally or intellectually or whatever it is. I know that's dangerous waters for people to talk about things that are greater and less than, but those are the facts of life. There's been a lot of debate about this SNAP stuff, right? And the way to push for more benefits and more entitlements for people, one heavily relied upon way to push for that is to bring up kids. And to bring up how, if you remove people from these programs, how children might be affected. That's the number one argument of, hey, well, we can't get rid of this because people have kids to feed and people have this to do and people have obligations, and you wouldn't take food out of the mouth of an innocent child, would you? And of course, when they put it that way, everybody says, well, of course not. We don't want to hurt children. None of us wants to hurt a fucking child. Who wants to hurt a child? Who really wants to sit there and hurt a child unless you're a PDF or you're the World Health Organization, right? But when you really think about it, are these people the ideal people to even have children? Because, look, okay, with the SNAP thing, right, I know I'm jumping over the place, but I feel like it connects. With the SNAP thing, it's like, okay, as I said, the argument is they have kids, right? These are families. But what my mind imagines and remembers, right, okay, to extrapolate from my own experience is I knew people, I grew up knowing people on assistance. And of course, they're all squawking now. They're all squawking. I knew people on public assistance. Okay? And what I noticed would happen with these people is they would keep reproducing. I remember being a kid, my family, my dad was well employed, my mom was well employed. We were not on public assistance, okay? I know not everybody can say that, and I know that in some way that's a privilege. That's a whole other, conversation about privilege and really better planning. But, I knew a lot of people that were on public assistance. And what I noticed is they kept having kids, right? And my mom, set me down, or whatever adults set me down, and they were like, no, this is what people take when they don't have enough money to eat, and they don't, and they need things. So people often rely on those systems. My mother not once, many times told me about how when she was a kid, she had to rely on those programs in order to eat. So I had an understanding of it. But, being a kid who was kind of a critical thinker, I was like, okay, so you're poor, check. You need stuff, check. The government is now giving you stuff, check. Okay, but you're pregnant again. Or your girlfriend's pregnant again. Or whatever it is. Won't you be making the situation worse by adding more mouths to feed? Won't you be making the situation worse by having more economic obligations and more time obligations? If you have a baby at home and you can't afford a babysitter, or you don't have family that's nearby, or, people you can trust to watch the baby, guess what? Somebody's going to have to stay home with the baby. So what does that mean? We got one less income. I used to think like that. That's why people are getting tired of these entitlements, because we're noticing that the most low vibrational people, the poorest planner people, okay, are utilizing these systems. The non-thinkers of the world fuck it up for the rest of us. The non-thinkers of the world fuck it up. I believe there should be a program to help people when they're down and out. I do believe that. I believe that if we're gonna be, Homo sapiens, if we're gonna be the species that emerged at the top, we should at least, hold fast to some of the reasons that we emerged to the top. A lot of, biologists, I forget the specific discipline that deals with ancient species, but a lot of scientists have theorized that the Homo sapien is as dominant as it is because we had empathy, because we had altruism. That's the word. Altruism, where we could think beyond ourselves as just a singular, being that's just going forward through space and time, and we can see that other person, that other hominid, or whatever we're turning into or coming from, hurting, and say, if I help that guy, that's going to be good, because I wouldn't want to be in that position. And also, if I help that guy, we have one more warrior to help us fight off this fucking saber-toothed tiger. So if I help this guy, the long-term net benefit is we all get better. And if I help this guy, I also stop someone from feeling a very horrible thing that I'm feeling. So do I think there should be programs that are here to help people? Yeah. That's a part of what being a human being is. Nobody's saying do away with that stuff, but I do think that there comes a point where we have to make people think very solidly about producing children. You should not be out there producing children if you're broke. I don't think you should be out there producing children if you're depressed and all this other shit too. But, I can't nail down depression. I can nail down your bank account. I can nail down mine. I don't need to have kids. Like we can nail that down. That's something we can look at. That's quantitative. We can look at your credit score. We can look at what you got in your savings. We can look at how frequently you work. We can look at how long you hold a job. We can look at all those things and decide, yeah, you shouldn't have a kid. I'll put it to you like this. If I have to pay for your kid, I should be able to decide if you get to have one. If I have to pay for your child, okay, because this excludes people who planned and people who, let's say, maybe needed public assistance but was on it briefly and got off it, right? This thought experiment applies to those lifers, those multi-generational welfare, Section 8, SNAP, WIC recipients, right? If I have to pay for your child, okay, then I should have a say on whether you get to have another one. Fair enough? Fair enough, until you become a higher vibrational creature and you do away with any entitlements that you're getting via hard work and self-reliance and going out there and making it happen, okay? Until you do those things, I get a say in what happens to your fucking sperm or your ovaries. Is that fair enough? Until you become a higher vibrational creature, we're going to save children from the samsara that you've intensified. Okay, samsara being the physical world, the world of pain in Buddhism. We're going to save children from the samsara that you've made for them and intensified, because they're already going to have pain, but you've made their pain worse. You've made their burden heavier. You've made their potential risk for depression and substance abuse even greater. Okay, until you can get out of being that, I get to decide, okay? The person who gets up and goes to work every day and is child-free and is declared to make too much to have any entitlement, I get to decide what happens with your gametes, because you are not a high vibrational person, okay? And I don't understand why we coddle people who can't control their bodies. In every other sense outside of having children, we don't coddle people who can't control their bodies other than people in fat acceptance, right? We coddle that. But the only two things we coddle are like fat acceptance now and just having kids willy-nilly, just busting out kids left and right? I was thinking of this earlier. If I decided to get drunk, like just drunk off my ass, and walk outside and start a fight for no reason, and the cops pull up, you know what's going to happen to me? I'm going to be arrested for assault and probably drunken and disorderly, okay? Why? Because I made a choice to imbibe alcohol to the point to where I was inebriated, and I went outside and chose to subject the public to that. Secondly, I put my hands on somebody. So that's assault and that's public intoxication. I did those things. I did not control my body. And as a result of that, I'm dealing with a negative consequence. You going out and having sex and producing the kid is the same thing. Okay, maybe there's not the same negative connotation with it, but it's the same thing. You knew that the ends weren't meeting. You knew that you had a negative number credit score. You knew that, the person that you were dealing with isn't going to step up and be a dad should you guys conceive. You knew all this. You knew the girl that you were dealing with was probably lying about her birth control or, popping holes in your condoms because this is one of these borderlines and she can't be abandoned. You knew what you were fucking dealing with, but you laid down anyway. And you chose pleasure, okay, over the benefit of your child and therefore the benefit of society. Why should I help you? Okay? Now, if the child's already here, the child's already here. There should be no subsequent children. There should be no SNAP beneficiaries, okay, that got on SNAP and then had another child while still being on SNAP. that should be outlawed. That should be something that should be taken away. That should be something that none of us put up with, okay? Lower vibrational beings produce more easily and more readily. If you've seen the movie Idiocracy, it shows that the stupid people just kept reproducing and the smart people kind of were killed out or killed off because they sat there and they thought about all the things that could happen. If you haven't seen Idiocracy, watch it because we're living it. Watch it because we're actually living it. But all the smart people and all the high IQs were killed out or outbred really by the stupid, and that's what's happening now. That's what's happening now. That's why more behavior that is thought to be degenerate is more permissible. That's why it's okay to have a ton of kids you can't pay for. It's okay to work fewer hours and just claim that you're mentally ill. It's okay to have a substance abuse issue. I think I repeated myself. It's okay to do so many things that confer upon you an image of a person who does not have to be concerned or responsible for themselves. Why is that more acceptable? Because we produce more people like that. Because we've allowed entitlement programs to support people who keep subsequently producing children. You understand? We've allowed that to happen. So we're getting more of these people who that's a whole way of life for them. So they're going to keep voting in support of fucking nonsense. They're going to keep voting in support of things that weaken people. Okay? So I don't know. I'm rambling. But I guess I say all this to say I really hope that human race looks more to the elephant than the cockroach eventually. One knows the stakes and one prepares and one does when one must and one abstains from things that might be, gratifying but ultimately is limiting because it takes away from your ability to be creative and do more and take chances. I hope humanity looks to that rather than the cockroach. We got a lot of cockroaches in this society. Okay, and those of us who are scapegoat kids know that better than most because a lot of narcs are cockroaches. I mean, let's face it. If you can just keep producing kids and treating them like shit, what's the difference between that and a fucking a snake or a lizard or anything just dropping eggs and walking off? What's the difference? What's the actual difference? You're leaving your child to predators in the house. You're leaving your child to verbal abuse. You're leaving your child to substance abuse because they're following your lead. That's the same as laying eggs on a beach and then going for a swim and letting the seagulls pick up and eat the baby turtles or crabs or various other life forms that are going to take advantage of these little things because they can't fend for themselves. What's the difference? Look at nature and you really know all you need to know. I'll shut up now.